No, Mr.
Morning.
No, no, Mr.
I'm just admitting the other guys. Jalan Garaifi, Knuz, Lulwa, Tadrus, Yahya Awad, Yasin, and Yusuf. Okay, guys, good morning all. Marim Naqib. Marim. So I have 15 uh, or Usama. Okay, Usama. Guys, who's called Dana? Somebody called Dana wanted to join. I didn't admit him or her. Please use your name, your full name. For example, Ali Gizi or Hassan Ruhaim and so on. Yasmin Sa'a, Yasmin Sa'a, Ali, and now there are 17 students in the room. Thank you all for joining, for being on time. Uh, as you remember, who's Dana, guys? Who is Dana? Hello, ladies, who's Dana?
Mr. It's Noreen, I think. No?
Ask her to change her name, please, because I won't
Okay.
admit her. Ask her to change her name. Uh, uh, as I told you yesterday, the day before, we are doing the book thief. If you remember, the book consists of 10 parts. It's not named chapters, it's named parts. Each part consists of some titles, as you can see here. We finished part 4 yesterday, and we said, let me remind you, we have Yasmin Said. Yasmin Said. Let me remind you that we are responsible for the part beginning with page 137. If I type here page 137, you'll see that the title is The Wrath of Rosa. The Wrath of Rosa. Wrath means anger. So in term 3, you're responsible for this part, beginning with page 137. Again and again, you're responsible for the part beginning with 137 until we stop, at the end of the term. Uh, this is Jana. Okay, Jana, if you can fix it, no problem. If you can't, you can chat, no problem. So let's go back to page 171, I think. Yes. So this is part 5. I think we're going to finish part 5 by the end of this term, maybe part of part 6. So part 5 is entitled The Whistler. And you know, a whistler is a person who has a whistle. Hiya. Okay. A whistler is a person who blows a whistle. You can whistle using your mouth like this. I'm bad at this, or you can use a tool called the whistle, like the referee of the football matches. He blows his whistle or she blows her whistle when there is a foul or a penalty or something like that. Okay, so part 5 entitled The Whistler, and these are the titles we'll see in this part. A floating book. I want to ask you first, guys who have a problem with the mic, please try to solve your problem. Try to solve your problem. I can see that most of them are there. So Jana and Tadros, they are active and they take part in the sessions almost every day. But as for Kunuz, she's not in the session for a long time. And I haven't heard from Kunuz for more than 2 weeks, maybe. Kunuz, try to solve your problem and try to take part in the session if you can hear me, and try to follow up, please, all of you. If I call your name twice or 3 times and you don't answer, this means you're absent. Abdurrahman Walid, you need to be more, let's say, you need to attend more because you are absent most of the time, and this is bad for your both attendance and participation. You know, there are 20 marks out of 100 marks for both attendance and participation. You weren't attending over the past week, I think, or 2 weeks, neither you nor Alia. Okay. And Noreen, if you can tell Noreen, guys, I haven't seen Noreen for almost a month. This means she'll have 0 for attendance, she'll have 0 for participation. Some people attend, but they never answer a question. They will get the 10 marks of attendance if they attend every day, every session, but they will get 0 for participation. So you need to be more active. Answer, try to read with me. If you're not sure about the answer, don't be afraid. Just give your answer. I don't punish you if it's wrong. Just participate. Give your opinion. Okay? Let's start with the question about this title, A Floating Boat. People who watched the movie at the beginning of the year, do you remember the floating boat, or can you tell me what is meant by this title? What do you think this title means? My advice is raise your hand and say whatever comes up to your mind. You might be right. You might be right. At least you participate. It's not important to give the right answer, but it's important to participate. Can you hear me, guys?
Maybe I can guess.
Okay, go ahead. This is who?
The floating book.
Yeah, who's that? Who's speaking?
Yasin.
Yasin, okay.
The floating book. It was يعني مثلا when Rudy jumped into the river to get the book.
Perfect.
It was the floating book.
Perfect. The book, when they were crossing a bridge, I think over the Amber River, the boy who used to hate, I don't remember his name, Rudy, took the book from them, from Rudy and Liesel, and threw it into the river. Rudy, although the weather was very cold, went into the river and retrieved the book, restored the book. Thank you, Yasin. That's it. Right. The gamblers, maybe you are going to read about gamblers. Who the gamblers are, we'll see. A small ghost, this is another title. 2 haircuts. 2 haircuts. Okay, maybe this is a gentleman will have a haircut or 2 haircuts. Maybe Hans, maybe Max. Rudy's youth will have a reflection about Rudy's youth. Losers and sketches. A whistler and some shoes. 3 acts of stupidity. Whose acts are these? We're not sure yet. And a frightened boy with frozen legs. A frightened boy with frozen legs. Let's see. Let's start part 1. The floating book. It's more than one part, and this is part 1. I want someone to read, please. Walid re-entered. عبد الرحمن وليد.
مستر أنا هطلع من ده وأدخل من التاني اللي هيدخل دلوقتي.
Walid, I just want to ask you, sorry, what's wrong with you and Alia? Why don't you attend the sessions?
مستر هو أنا معرفش عليه بس هو بحضر على طول. أنا بس ال3 أيام اللي فاتوا بعد الامتحان كنت مسافر ومعيش نت.
Last week I was absent for 2 days, I think, but before those 2 days you were always absent or inactive. You are in the session. Even if you are in the session, you don't answer, you don't raise your hand. But you are a good boy. Please be more active, because this way you lose many marks. If you're worried about your marks, please be more active. This is a piece of advice. Sorry to say that. And this is a piece of advice for all of you. So who's ready to read? Rahayan, you raise your hand. Raise your voice, please. And follow up, guys.
The floating book, part 1. A book floated down the Amber River. A boy jumped in, caught up to it, and held it in his right hand. He grinned. He stood waist deep in the icy Decemberish water. How about a kiss, Samanish? He said the surrounding air was a lovely, gorgeous, no sitting cold, not to mention the concrete ache of the water thickening from his toes to his hips. How about a kiss? How about a kiss? Poor Rudy. A small announcement about Rudy Steiner. He didn't deserve to die the way he did. In
Wait,
your visions,
Hassan. So
okay.
the book was thrown into the river, and a boy, this boy is Rudy, of course, Rudy Steiner, jumped in this very, very, very cold weather, sorry, caught up to it, caught the book, and held it in his right hand. He held the book, if you remember the movie, in his right hand, he held it up. He grinned. Grin means smile from ear to ear, a wide smile. Grin to whom? To Liesel, of course. He stood waist deep in the icy Decemberish water. You can imagine how we are in Germany, in Europe, and you can imagine how the water is in December. Even in Egypt here, if you want to wash your hands now these days, you feel that the water is very cold from the tap water. Imagine that you are in the middle of the river, and all or your whole body is soaked in water, this icy Decemberish water. How about a kiss, Zaumen? She said to Liesel. Of course, he asks her for a kiss very often. The surrounding air was a lovely, gorgeous, nauseating cold, very, very cold, not to mention the concrete ache, the pain of the water itself thickening from his toes to his hips. From his toes, sorry, to his hips. This part was covered with water. He asked again, what about the kiss? What about the kiss? Poor Rudy, here we have a small announcement from the narrator that tells us that he didn't deserve to die the way he did. Rudy didn't deserve to die the way he did. Go on, Hassan, sorry.
In your visions, you see the sloppy edges of paper still stuck to his fingers. You see a shivering blonde fringe. Primitively, you conclude, as I would, that Rudy died the very same day of hypothermia. He did not. Recollections like those merely remind me that uh, he was not deserving of the fate that met him a little under 2 years later. On many counts, taking a boy like Rudy was robbery. So much to live for. Yet somehow, I'm certain he would have loved to see the frightening rubble at the swelling of the sky on the night he passed away. He had have he had have cried and turned and smiled if only he could have seen the bookcase on her hands and knees next to the decimated body. He had have been glad to witness her kissing his dusty bomb-head lips. Yes, I know. In the darkness of my dark beating heart, I know I'd have loved it. All right, you see, even death has a heart.
Okay, so Hassan, here in this paragraph, Death tells us that again, the boy didn't deserve to die the way he did. You can imagine that he died on that same day in which he dived into into the river to retrieve the book, but he didn't. He died 2 years later. Here he says he died 2 years later in the bomb attack by the British Army, if you remember. On many counts, taking a boy like Rudy was robbery. This is the narrator is Death. Death considered that taking the life of a young boy like Rudy was robbery. So much life, he was full of life, so much to live for. He has his future lying before him. Yet somehow, I'm certain he would have loved to see the frightening rubble and the swelling of the sky on that night when Hemel Street was bombed and when most of the people Liesel knew lost their lives. So here we have the last line of the page. Even death has a heart, because even death considered that the boy or taking the life of the boy at that time was a robbery. Thank you very much, Hassan. The second title is The Gamblers. You know, a gambler is a person maybe who bets that something will happen and he or she is ready to pay money for this. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but most of the time, you know, gamblers lose much money. They even sell their clothes sometimes. So we have seven-sided die. You know, a die is the stuff they use to play some games, like this one. Here we have one on some sides. On the other side, we have 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which is called the dice or a die. Who's ready to read, guys? I have 19 students. Don't say Hassan only. Okay, Lolwa. Thank you, Lolwa. Lolwa saved you. Okay, go ahead.
Me, Mr.
Yes, Lolwa.
Of course, I'm being rude. I'm spoiling the ending, not only for entire book, but but of this particular piece of it. I've given you two events in advance because I don't have much interest in bullying mystery. Mystery bores me. It cores me. I know what happens, and so do you. It's machinations that wheel us there, that aggressive, perplex, interest, and astound me.
Wait,
There are many things to think of.
Lolwa, hold on, please. So the narrator, Death, says, I'm being rude. This is the narrator, Death, talking about himself. I'm spoiling the ending because sometimes the plot of any novel or any movie depends on mystery. You don't know what will happen at the end. Don't tell me the story because I want to see what will happen at the end. Now, Death tells us that Rudy will die in the near future, 2 years after now. Okay, this is called foreshadowing, as you know. The narrator here uses foreshadowing all the time in his titles and in his stories. So we know from now that Rudy will die in 2 years from now. Okay, so he says, mystery bores me. The narrator doesn't like mystery. It chores me like the household chores. You hate chores. It makes me bored. I know what happens, and so do you. You know what will happen now. Okay, it's the machinations that wheel us, that drives us, that push us there, that aggravate, perplex, confuse, interest, and astound me. There are many things to think of. There is much story. Lulwa?
Um, Certainly, there is a book called The Whistler, which we really need to discuss, along with exactly how it come to be floating down the Amber River in the time leading up to Christmas 1941. We should deal with all of the first, do you think? Don't you think? Settled then, we will. It started with gambling, roll a die by hiding Jew, and this is how you live. This is how it looks. Life was at least starting to mimic normality with more force. Hams and Rosa Hopperman were arguing in their living room, even if it was much quieter than it used to be. Basil, in typical fashion, was an onlooker. The argument originated the previous night in the basement where Hans and Max were sitting with paint cans, words, and job sheet. Max asked if Rosa might be able to cut his hair at some stage. It's getting me in the eye, he'd said. To which Hans had replied, I'll see what I can do. Now Rosa was riffling through the drawers. Her words were shoved back to Papa with the rest of the junk. Where are those damn scissors? Not in the one below. I've been through the one already. Maybe you missed them.
Wait, hold on. So Hans, Max wants or needs a haircut. Max needs a haircut. You know, he hasn't had his haircut for a long time. And he asked for a haircut. Why? Because his hair was, it's getting in or me in the eyes. His hair was too long to get, or it got into his eyes. It's getting me in the eyes. Who said this? Max. What is it? It's his hair. It's getting me in the eyes. Okay. He complained that his hair was very long. He needed a haircut. He asked Hans if Rosa can do the job for him. He said, I'll see what I can do. This is Hans. He went up to Rosa and asked her to cut Max's hair, and she was looking for the scissors. She was like angry. Where are those damn scissors? Not in the one below, not in the drawer below. I have been through that one already. I have looked there. Lolwa, go on.
Okay. Maybe you missed them. Do I look blind? She raised her head and bellowed. Liesel, I'm right here. Hands covered. Woman, defend me. Why don't you? Quiet. Rosa went to riffling and addressed the girl. Liesel, where are the scissors? Liesel had no idea either. You're useless, aren't you? Leave her out of it. More words were delivered back and forth from elastic-haired woman to silver-eyed man till Rosa slammed the drawer. I'll probably make a lot of mistakes on him anyway. Mistakes? Papa looked ready to tear his own hair out by that stage, but his voice became barely audible whisper. Who the hell's going to see him? He wanted to speak again, but was distracted by the feathery appearance of Max Van Berg, who stood politely embarrassed in the doorway. He carried his own scissors and came forward, handing them not to Hans or Rosa, but to the 12-year-old girl. She was the calmest option. His mouth quivered a moment before he said, "Would you?"
Thank you.
Liesel
Okay.
took the scissor and...
Hold on. Thank you very much. Okay. So I just want to explain this part. So guys, I just want to ask some silly questions to check you're following up. Who needs a haircut? Osama, are you there? Osama? Osama? Osama is not there. Haya? Haya, can you hear me? Haya? Haya? So Osama and Haya are absent. Tell them they are absent. Osama and Haya. Yasmin Said. Yasmin Said.
Yes, miss.
Who needs a haircut?
Who needs a haircut?
Yes.
Yes.
Were you following up?
Yes.
So who needs a haircut?
Rudy.
Rudy?
صح؟ صح؟
No, not exactly. Follow up, please, Yasmin. Hassan Gouda? Hassan Gouda? Hassan Gouda, are you there?
Yes, miss.
Okay, who needs a haircut, Hassan?
Hand.
Hands?
Mister, the answer is in the chat.
جاوبت في الشات. هي جاوبت في الشات.
Okay. Please, guys, solve your problem with the mics. Solve your problems with the mics. Because I want to focus on the lesson. I don't want to go to the chat and then come back and okay. So it was Max who wanted or needed a haircut. Abdurrahman Walid, why does Max need a haircut? Walid?
Yes.
Why does Max need a haircut?
His hair is too long.
It gets into his
face.
His eyes. It gets into his eyes. Follow up, please. Okay. So, who does Max want to cut his hair at the beginning? Let's go to Yahya Awad. Yahya, can you hear me, Yahya? Yahya. So Yahya is not there.
سامعك يا مستر سامعك.
أنا يا مستر. طيب أوكي.
ايه السؤال تاني معلش؟
السؤال تاني يبقى أنت you weren't following up يحيى.
لا سمعت بس ما سمعتش كويس.
طيب the question again, speak in English please. The question again. Who does Max want to cut his hair at the beginning? Hans.
Rosa.
Sorry. Yeah, he asked for or asked Hans to ask Rosa to cut his hair. Why? Maybe because Rosa was good at making clothes or ironing and doing such stuff. He thought that Rosa would be a better barber or hairdresser than Hans. So there is a problem. Rosa can't find her scissors. She's angry, she's nervous, and she can't, or she keeps saying Zaumensch and Zauker to both Hans and Liesel. At the end, when Max saw them something like fighting quietly, he held his own scissors and gave them to Liesel. Okay, here Rosa was afraid that she would make any mistakes with his hair. She says here, more words were delivered back and forth between Hans and his wife, from elastic-haired woman to silver-eyed man. Elastic-haired woman is Rosa. Silver-eyed man is Hans. Till Rosa slammed the drawer. She closed the drawer strongly, like slamming the door. I'll probably make a lot of mistakes on him anyway. I am not good at cutting hair. I'll probably make a lot of mistakes with his hair. Hans answered her mistakes, mistakes, and he said, who the hell's going to see him? Don't worry about making mistakes, because the man is like the rat who's hiding in his hole in the basement down. Don't worry if you make any mistakes. At the end, he carried his own scissors. This is Max, and came forward, handing them not to Hans or Rosa, but to the 12-year-old girl, to Liesel. She was the calmest option because, again, Rosa and Hans were something like fighting. His mouth quivered, shook a moment before he said, would you? So Max is handing his scissors, his own scissors, to Liesel to cut his hair. I want a new person to read. Another person to read. Thank you, Lolwa. Another person, please. I don't have anybody. I have two raised hands, but
sorry, Mr. The internet.
Okay, but it's too late. Too late. You're not allowed to join after 7 minutes, but this time I'll accept it. I need somebody to read. I have three hands.
The internet wasn't working, wallah.
Okay, I believe you. But these days you're absent very often, Layan. Please be careful. And if you are in the session, please try to be active, try to read, try to answer questions, and so on. طيب, we'll take Yusuf Awad because this is the first raised hand in front of me. Yusuf Awad.
Liesel took the scissors and opened them. They were rusty and shiny in different areas. She turned to Papa, and when he nodded, she followed Max down to the basement. The shoes sat on a paint can. A small drop sheet was wrapped around his shoulders. As many mistakes as you want, he told her. Papa parked himself on the steps. Liesel lifted the first tufts of Max Vandenberg's hair. As she cut the feathery strands, she wondered that, at the sound of scissors, not the snapping noise, but the grind of each metal arm as it cropped each group of fibers. When the job was done, a little severe in places, a little crude in others, she walked upstairs with the hair in her hands and fed it into the stove. She lit a match and watched as the clump shriveled and stank, orange and red. Again, Max was in the doorway, this time at the top of the basement steps. Thanks, Liesel. His voice was tall and husky with the sound in it of a hidden smile. No sooner had he spoken than he disappeared again back into the ground.
Wait, Yusuf, hold on. So this is, in the part Yusuf has just read, this is the description of the process of cutting Max's hair. Who is the barber here? It's Liesel. She used, again, rusty and shiny scissors. Rusty, they were rusty, you know rusty, okay? She turned to Papa, and when he nodded, he gave her the permission to start. She followed Max down to the basement. He sat on a paint can, and they wrapped a drop sheet around his shoulders, like what happens in any barber shop. As many mistakes as you want, Max said to her, and don't worry, make the number of mistakes you want with my hair. Papa parked himself on the steps, watching her doing this job. Liesel lifted the first group of Max's hair, and after doing her job, here they say it was a little severe in places. The cutting of the hair was severe in places and crooked in others, which means Max's hair was full of mistakes. She walked upstairs with the hair in her hands and fed it into the stove. So what did Liesel do with Max's hair after cutting it? She put it into the stove, or she burned it again, and she lit a match and watched it as the clump shriveled and sank into the fire, orange and red. Again, Max was in the doorway, this time at the top of the basement steps. Thanks, Liesel. His voice was tall and husky, with the sound in it of a hidden smile. He was happy having his hair cut by Liesel. This was the first side of the die. The second side is titled The Newspaper, Early May. Go on, Yusuf.
There's a Jew in my basement. There's a Jew in my basement, sitting on the floor of the mayor's room full of books. Liz Memminger heard those words. A bag of washing was at her side, and the ghostly figure of the mayor's wife was sitting hunched, drunk over at the desk in front of her. Liz read the Whistler pages 22 and 23. She looked up. She imagined herself walking over, gently tearing some fluffy hair to the side, and whispering to the woman's ear. There is a Jew in my basement. As the book quivered in her lap, the secret sat in her mouth. It made itself comfortable. It crossed its legs. It should be getting home this time. She actually spoke. Her hands were shaking despite a trace of sunshine in the distance. A gentle breeze rolled through the open window, coupled with the rain that came in like sawdust. When Lisa placed the book back into position, the woman's chair stopped the floor. She made her way over. It was always like this at the end. The gentle rings of sorrowful wrinkles swirled a moment as she reached across and retrieved the book. She offered it to the girl. Liesel shied away. No, she said, thank you. I have enough books at home. Maybe at the time I'm rereading something else with my papa. You know the one I saw from fire that night? The mayor's wife nodded. If there was one thing about Lizzie Memminger, her thieving was not gratuitous. The only toolbox on what she felt was need to have pieces. Currently, she had enough. She had gone through the mud mill 4 times now and was enjoying her reacquaintance with the shoulder shrug. Also, each night before bed, she would open a fail-safe guide to grave digging. Buried deep inside it, the standover man recited. She mouthed the words and touched the birds. She turned 90 pages slowly. Goodbye, Frau Hermann. She exited the library, walked down the floorboard hall, and out the monastery's doorway. As was her habit, she stood for a while on the steps, looking at the walking beneath her. The town that afternoon was covered in a yellow mist, which striped the rooftops as if they were beds and filled up the streets like a bath.
Wait, Yusuf, hold on. So, in this scene, maybe Liesel is reading a book or going through some books in the mayor's library, and there is a voice coming out from her. There is a Jew hiding in my basement, as if the girl, again, the 12-year-old child, finds it hard to keep the secret. Remember the lecture Hans gave her to keep it secret. If they take, if you tell anybody about Max hiding in our basement, we will be arrested and he will not live with us anymore. He will be taken from us, and so on. But the girl still finds it hard to keep the secret, and she is struggling with herself. Okay, something inside her said, "A Jew is hiding in my basement. A Jew is hiding in my basement." But this time she could control herself, and she didn't tell the mayor's wife about the secret. Yusuf, go on. Here, I think.
When she made it down to New York Street, the book thief swerved in and out of the unparalleled man and woman, a wrinkled girl who made her way without shame from one garbage can to another like clockwork. There, she laughed up to the copper clouds, celebrating before reaching in and taking the mangled newspaper. Though the front and back pages were streaked with black tears of print, she folded it neatly in half and tucked it under her arm. It had been like this each Thursday for the past few months.
Wait, Yusuf. So she picked up an old newspaper from the can in the street, and she was in this habit every Thursday. She took an old newspaper and gave it to Max to read it. Okay, go on, Yusuf.
Thursday was the only livery day left for Lisa Memminger now, and it was usually able to provide some sort of dividend. She could never dampen the feelings of victory each time she found a Market Express or another publication. Finding a newspaper was a good day. If it was a paper in which the crossword wasn't done, it was a great day. She would make her way home, shut the door behind her, and take it down to Max Vandenberg.
Okay, so every Thursday, the girl went to the let's say the garbage can or the trash can in the street and looked for an old newspaper for Max. If she finds one, it was a good day. If she finds one with the crossword puzzle, you know, she used to take the newspaper to Max to do the crossword puzzle. If it wasn't done, it was a great day. Yani, it was a very good thing because she knew that Max wanted to do the crossword puzzle. She would make her way home, shut the door behind her, and take it down to Max Vandenberg or Vandenberg. Crossword, he would ask, yani, is the crossword undone? Empty. She answered him, it's empty. He answered, excellent. Okay, thank you, Yusuf. I need a new guy to read. Tadros, go ahead.
The Jew would smile as he accepted the package of paper and started reading in the rationed light of the basement. Often Diesel would watch him as he focused on reading the paper, complete the crossword, and then start to reread it front to back. With the weather warming, Max remained downstairs all the time during the day. The basement door was left open to allow the small boy of daylight to reach him from the corridor. The hall itself wasn't exactly bad in the sunshine, but in certain situations, you take what you can get. Door light was better than none, and they needed to be frugal. The kerosene had not yet approached a dangerously low level, but it was best to keep its usage to a minimum. Diesel
So
would
they needed
usually
to
sit.
take, sorry, the place in the basement was almost dark, apart from that little light that comes from the corridor and from the door of the basement. They used to use little kerosene, which is frugal here. When you use a little of something just to save, in case we are in war, we don't know what will happen. Frugal means economical. If you know the word economical means saving. Frugal means saving. A person who saves is frugal. Frugal. Okay. Go on, Tadrus. I'll just roll up a little bit.
Liesel would usually sit on some drop sheets. She would read while Max completed those crosswords. They sat a few meters apart, speaking very rarely, and there was really only the noise of turning pages. Often she also left her books for Max to read while she was at school, where Hans Huberman and Eric Weisenberg were ultimately united by music. Max and Liesel were held together by the quiet gathering of words. Hi, Max. Hi, Liesel. They would sit and read. At times she would watch him. She decided that he could best be summed up as a picture of pale concentration, beige colored skin, a swamp in each eye, and he breathed like a fugitive, desperate yet soundless. It was only his chest that gave him away for something alive. Increasingly, Liesel would close her eyes and ask Max to quiz her on the words she was continually getting wrong, and she would swear if they still escaped her. She would then stand and pin those words to the wall anywhere up to a dozen times. Together, Max Weidenberg and Liesel Meminger would take in the odor of paint, fumes, and cement. By Max, by Liesel. In bed, she would lie awake, imagining him below, in the basement. In her bedtime visions, he always slept fully clothed, shoes included, just in case he needed to flee again. He slept with one eye open.
Thank you, Tadrus. This is the end of the session. The session will end in a second. Thank you. See you in 5 minutes.